Do you support the protest being held nationwide decrying the acquittal of George Zimmerman? Or do you accept the verdict and want to see people move on? Should Zimmerman face civil rights violations and future lawsuits? Or is it time to let him move on as well? It's Your Call examines the long-term impact of this case with its longtime panel of legal experts, and the anticipated fireworks start right now. He may be a free man, but George Zimmerman is anything but free right now. He's facing death threats, national protest against his acquittal, and a litany of possible legal problems. Do you think that's fair, or do you think it's warranted? Just a couple of questions that we'll ask this hour on It's Your Call. Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us. I'm Lynn Doyle. You know, from the moment the jury announced its decision in the George Zimmerman murder trial, emotions have been running extremely high. And despite the time that's gone by since then, it seems they're getting even more volatile. The former defendant is in hiding as he's said to be in fear for his life. Despite calls to accept the jury's decision, there have been death threats made against him. There are also calls for more legal action against him as well, and the verdict has once again heightened racial tensions across this country. So, we're asking you first this hour, do you accept the verdict? If so, why? And if not, why not? And do you agree with these protests that are being held all over the country? Should Zimmerman face further legal action, or is it time for the country and him to start healing? If you want to tell us what you think about that, you can start emailing me right now. I'm directly at lynn@lynndoyle.net. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. I want to introduce our great legal panel joining us today. Attorney Sadie LaDove is a partner in the law firm of Dolchin, Slotkin and Todd. She's a former prosecutor in the Bronx and a past chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association. Jeff Gold is a criminal defense attorney with the law offices of Gold and Associates. He's a former New Jersey prosecutor who also does legal analysis for the media. Tariq El-Shabazz is a former Philadelphia assistant district attorney who's now in private practice at El-Shabazz and Harris LLC. And Nikki Johnson Houston is a former assistant city solicitor for Philadelphia. She recently founded the law office that bears her name and continues work as a motivational speaker. Great to have you all here.
Thanks for having us.
This was probably one of the most highly anticipated verdicts in recent memory, and I have to turn to Tariq first to get your reaction to it, because I know you were very emotional as we were waiting that verdict, and in the week since it has been announced, that emotion has gotten even stronger.
Absolutely. Very frustrated, aggravated, agitated. I'm trying to think of other descriptive words, but we're not pleased at all, and I think that we're not pleased because it appears as if a man has gotten away with murder under the guise of the self-defense argument, and some people would say stand your ground.
When you say we, are you talking about the African American community?
I'm talking about anyone that is concerned about the way someone's dressed, and that dress calling towards them being suspicious or being profiled, because we know that not only African Americans wear hoodies, we have a lot of other individuals as well. But I'm definitely speaking as an African American man. I think I would be disingenuous to say that I'm not. And
yet Jeff Gold covered this for various media outlets during the trial, and you predicted before the verdict that there would be an acquittal. There didn't really seem to be any doubt in your mind, because you said the state didn't prove its case right from the get-go.
Right. I really don't think any of the protesters either, if they had sat in that courtroom and listened to what the evidence was, the state's own evidence created a doubt. And that's what the standard is. Now, I understand what's in the protesters' hearts, but nevertheless, in terms of the evidence before the court, there was a doubt under Florida law as to whether or not this was self-defense or not, and the state had to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt.
You know, it's interesting, Sadie, because there's a lot of anger directed at George Zimmerman, and I don't think anyone here is going to say that he should have done what he did. But should the anger really be directed toward the prosecution, who didn't prove its case against him beyond a reasonable doubt?
That's a great question. I think that, as I said, the prosecution did a fair job, not a great job, but the real bigger beef is the law. If you believe that the jurors were appropriately instructed on the law and they followed the law needs to be changed.
And Nikki, how about you? Weigh in here as someone who studied law, is an African American woman, and has been watching the reaction across the country through these protests?
I'm torn. I can understand both sides. As a lawyer, I respect the process and understand why the jury came to the decision that it did. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I respect the system and I will go along with that. I have been concerned with some of the things that I've seen since the decision has been made. I certainly think that citizens have a right to protest, and that is our rights as citizens.
Okay, let's talk about these protests a little bit. I mean, what do we hope to do here other than just inflame an already tense racial situation?
Lynn, it's not about inflammation, respectfully. You know, we live in a great country, whether you agree with the Zimmerman verdict or you don't. We live in a great country. And if
I used to think that before the verdict.
But here's my point. If I want to, on July 4th, read the Communist Manifesto while standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, that's my right. And if people want to get together and have a peaceful protest to vent their frustration and express their position, that's fine with me. But it has to be peaceful and appropriate.
Look, I would only say this, is that what the protesters should do, as you've stated, is really be protesting stand your ground. Yes. Be protesting the fact that Florida has no duty to retreat. I understand what's in their hearts. I understand because I'm a criminal defense attorney and I've represented more black men for things they didn't do than white men. I understand that people get arrested for driving while black, maybe walking while black. But nevertheless, in this particular case, what they should be protesting is a law that allowed deadly force to be used before a defendant.
And I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. But the truth is, they're also protesting the system where they feel that as African Americans, their lives don't have the same amount of value.
Because that's how it appears. If we look at it, we can give you a litany of names of individuals, that young black African American males that have been killed because of being profiled. So this is not an isolated incident, but it's an incident in which people hoped and prayed and believed that justice would be done. And we believe that some responsibility and obligation upon George Zimmerman is responsibility and justice being done.
One of the things that is under consideration by the Department of Justice is a civil rights violation against George Zimmerman. Would you say that he profiled Trayvon Martin because he was black, or was he an over-enthusiastic neighborhood volunteer who was out to get anyone that he thought, anyone of any color, of any sex, any ethnicity, whatever, who was doing something he thought was suspicious?
It's a difficult question, Lynn, because I only can answer that based upon what limited amount of information we have with respect to him in this particular case. It seems and it appears that he profiled him because he's an African-American male with a hoodie shirt on.
But they would have to prove that in a civil rights violation case, correct?
And I'm not sure that they can.
We don't really know that he profiled. We know he said he was African-American. That's it, though.
But he said that but he said that these guys are getting away with this. He's tired of them getting away with this, certain things of that nature.
Couldn't he have been using they, meaning bad guys or a-holes? That was the word that he used.
And even if he used bad guys,
black people getting away with it?
He absolutely can. But if he used it in terms of bad guys, if he used it in terms of punks, he's still profiling. The difference is one is racial profiling, one is profiling a particular person because of the way that they dress.
Either way, all the time.
No, but that doesn't make it right. Either way, that profiling is an incorrect activity.
What do you think about? Let me ask you, Treek. What do you think about the hoodies? You know, to me, when I was a kid, bad guys in my neighborhood were called hoods, okay? And before them, they were called hoodlums. And that's because there's an old tradition of thieves not wanting to be seen. You know, I don't know how the hoodie became venerated. If you watched in the courtroom, they took this hoodie forensically and put it in kind of a crucifix, display because it was venerated. I don't think saying a guy in my neighborhood, I don't know, and he didn't live there, had a hoodie.
He had a right to wear it.
What difference does it make if he lives there? If I don't live in your neighborhood and I'm walking down your street, are you going to come after me? How do you know where I live? I don't have a tattooed on my head.
I'm only saying the two facts that are being cited all the time is he was black, which he had to describe him to the dispatcher, and two, he had a hoodie. I don't think having a hoodie is as innocuous as everyone else.
It is innocuous. It's innocuous when everybody dressed that way.
That's a generational thing.
It's a generational thing. You know the interesting thing about this? We can have this argument with parents of people of the 60s and parents of children of the 70s and parents of children of the 80s to the end of it, because each time, each generation had something that set them off from everyone else. I mean, they thought hippies, everybody that was an alleged hippie, was a criminal looking person.
If you had long hair, my father thought you were a bad dude.
Which means what? that means that we're profiling people based upon not only the color of their skin, their complexion, their ethnicity, or the way that they're dressed. Either way, that's a problem.
And this is a problem. It's a societal problem. What this case, though, highlighted is, again, the tension between the races. And initially, police did not charge this man because they thought they didn't have enough
Problem
evidence.
number one.
Problem number one. And then, would you agree that the prosecutors
Overcharged.
responded to reaction, to vehement, emotional, racially motivated
They should have
tension?
been a manslaughter case.
Yes.
I think they overcharged, and I think they overreached, and it ended up hurting them in the end.
Overcharge, overreach, and didn't even focus on manslaughter. In fact, even in the closing, although they asked for it to be a lesser included charge, which it could have been, and it was appropriately put, they never even argued or focused on manslaughter. It seems to me that, and I agree that self-defense is a defense to manslaughter as well, but it seems to me that you lose the jury and you lose the majority of people when you're trying to talk about the elements of second degree and this particular case.
Can I go one step further and say, did anyone else think that maybe the prosecution just went through the motions? Because it seems like they were forced to prosecute, and then they kind of put up like a half-something case. And even the attorney general there was kind of smiling the night that the verdict came out, like, we did our best.
Lynn, these two prosecutors have extraordinarily good records at achieving convictions. They are competent, qualified lawyers. And I posed this question before we got on the air today, quite candidly, to my colleagues, and I said, do you think they threw this case? I would hate to believe it. Do you think they just said, we're going to throw whatever we've got up against the wall, see what it sticks, let the chips fall where they may?
Well, that's the difference between that and throwing.
I'm going to ask the question to our viewers, do you think the prosecution did the best it possibly could, or do you think it was just kind of following through on the pressure that it felt to do something against George Zimmerman? And what should be next for him? Should he be allowed to move on with his life? Doesn't seem like he is right now. Tell us what you think. Email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. We're going to check in with your answers right after this. Welcome back again, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call. Our question to you is, what's next for George Zimmerman? Of course, as you know, he was acquitted of second degree and in the case of Trayvon Martin and other charges as well. But now he's in hiding, afraid for his life because people are not responding well to that verdict. We want to know what you think about that. So throughout the show, we're going to be sharing some of the comments that came in on my Facebook page and nearly blew it up. So if you want to tell us what you think, you can email me or send notes to the guest as well at lynn@lynndoyle.net. Okay, here's the thing. They called for an investigation. They called for a criminal case. But then they didn't like what they got. So we live in a country where you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, or you can't be found guilty if there's a reasonable doubt. People are not accepting the verdict, but that's what the jury of his peers came up with.
That's right.
So you can't have it both ways if you sit
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
sure you can.
Sure
you
this
can.
Was a political trial, and anywhere
Wait,
else in the world,
come on,
they
where
see
are
it
we?
as a
In the
political
former
trial.
Soviet Union, this
That's
is
what
not a
this
political
was.
trial.
One second. Governor Scott took it away from the local prosecutors for no reason. The local prosecutors didn't recuse themselves. They didn't have a reason. They just
didn't make an arrest.
They just
didn't make an arrest.
They just took it away and gave it to Attorney General.
It was right to take it away from the locals, and I'll tell you something.
Why? Why was it right to take it away from the locals?
Just because you don't want any evidence, you don't want a perception.
Because of the politics.
You do not want a perception of favoritism one way or the other, and I think
I kind of think you take it away from them when the son of the person that did the shooting is a magistrate or was a former magistrate in the same place. I don't give a damn. What they did is they didn't want the impropriety of or the appearance of impropriety.
And at the same time, no matter what the facts were.
And it should have, because across this nation, African American males are being murdered as if in fact they have no value to their life at all, and there's no consequences or repercussions as a result of those individuals doing it.
And that's
He
a
should go into
travesty.
trial.
That is a travesty, and people watching the show will agree with you. Regardless of their race, they will agree that that is a travesty. But if a jury comes back and says, we didn't have enough evidence to convict this particular person in this particular case, why have national protests?
But that's the wonderful thing
We're
about
allowed
this
to.
country. You can accept
because
the
you
verdict.
can?
Yeah, that's right.
That's
you can
part of it.
accept the verdict and still protest. You can say, I get it, I accept it. If people did not
well, I split
accept
the
the
difference
verdict.
that there were no riots, and that's a good thing.
So that
This
must
is
mean
not-
that people
well, this is
accept
not
the
this
verdict.
is not Rodney
Right.
King. So
Right.
that people are peacefully protesting with a very few exceptions, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're allowed
right.
to do that. I agree with
Absolutely.
Sadie.
Peacefully
Absolutely.
protesting is one thing, Nikki. Death threats against a defendant,
I
that's
do not agree.
another
I do not
story.
agree with that.
I mean,
I don't
he's
think there's
an
any
American.
place.
Let me say
Found not
this.
guilty.
Is George Zimmerman being profiled right now? So are people profiling him? I don't give a damn that they're profiling George Zimmerman right now, because profile this young 17, really 16 years old. He wasn't 17 yet. This 16-year-old African-American male who was going to, despite what Jeff said, going to the home of his father's fiance, that coming from a store, doing nothing to no one else because of the way he was
No, he
dressed.
could have went to his house. He didn't. He chose to come back
He didn't have to,
and
though.
sucker punch
He didn't
George
have
Zimmerman.
to.
That's where the
he chose
problem
to
was.
punch the person in the
Look.
face who got out of the vehicle that shouldn't have got out of the vehicle
Look,
and got
I
out of the
get
vehicle
it.
because he
On
had a
both
gun.
si- on both sides.
Okay,
On
and if
both sides.
he
But in the end-
precipitated it. He precipitated it. He sits in his car.
No.
Nobody's punched. Nobody's shot.
you-
nobody do anything.
know,
But
You
this
guys
doesn't
are
answer the
all-
question.
Right, I was going to say, you're all in the legal system and you know the law better than anybody, but the question remains, if he was found not guilty, aren't we supposed to accept that? I mean, isn't that
we are, but there's
American
other
legal
accept it.
system
No,
is
it's two different
disagreeing
things.
on?
You can accept it but not be happy with it, and that's why you have the right to protest. That's why Trayvon Martin's family has the right to civilly go and try to receive damages
and
against
the
him.
protest is not just about Zimmerman getting away. It's about focusing on a law that I would submit to you as barbaric. A law that should have some safeguards to it. Don't get it twisted. I have no problem at all of defending yourself and the right to self-defense, but there should be certain safeguards. And there was no safeguard in the Stand Your Ground self-defense law of Florida. And so it should be protest, because until they change that law, you're going to have innocent young men being killed with no one being accountable.
You should
And
not
that's
be
a
able.
problem.
You
That's a
should
fair-
not
that's
be
a
able.
fair
You
thing
should
to
not be
protest.
able
The
to
law.
bring a
But
gun
they shouldn't be
and use a
protesting
gun with
this verdict.
impunity to a fist
Now they
fight.
should protest the
People
verdict.
can
No.
people can protest. You can't put restrictions on how people
That's-
protest
Exactly.
and what they're
And
protesting.
reasonable
Exactly.
jurors
you
can
cannot.
differ. There could have
Right.
been a different jury. I can submit to you. I can sit 6 jurors that would convict George Zimmerman on the same evidence.
But there's
So
no place
people
for
can
death
differ.
threats.
I don't have a problem with them protesting. I don't have a problem with them protesting the verdict. And I tell you, to be perfectly honest with you, Robert Zimmerman Jr. would make me want to go out and protest with some of the asinine comments he's made.
And the truth
brother.
is you can
His
win
brother.
in the court of law and lose in the court of public opinion.
That's
and
right.
we are seeing that play
You're
out in
saying-
this
And you
case.
can bring
We've
a
seen it in
civil
Penang with other
You
cases.
can bring a successful civil action against George Zimmerman and take that finding of responsibility.
In fact, we want
if
him to
one
be
is
successful
found.
in this suit against
And-
NBC.
and
you know
Because
what?
all the money
You
he
know
gets
what?
from
There's
NBC,
lines
I
with
want
it.
I want
They have already-
Trayvon Martin's family to get when they sue him.
They have already been successful in a settlement with the homeowners for an undisclosed amount. On the civil suit that they may take, the problem is that Stand Your Ground applies to the civil case as well. So if he is persuasive, he would have immunity,
Immunity
and
from
then the plaintiffs would have to pay for his attorneys.
Right.
But,
So
I,
there is
but I
some-
can assure you
Furthermore,
this.
Jeffrey, good chance that he's
under these set of
judgment-proof.
circumstances, I
On
think
top
there's
of
a
that.
good chance in a civil suit that he's not going to be successful.
But
Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the jury.
Right.
Jeff seems to think that a
It
civil
depends on the
suit might
attorneys and how they
actually
try it.
might actually have some
You might go down
difficulty
there.
for
What,
his
uh,
family or for the prosecutors.
That's right. Now, somebody may want to bankroll him, but Marco O'Mara said bring it on, because that may be the first time he gets paid in the case. They'd have
In
to pay for
Florida-
him.
And I wish, and listen, this is not a shameless plug, but if they want to sue and Mark O'Mara really thinks he can try a damn case, they can come get me. So tell Mark O'Mara that he can continue to believe that, because he didn't do such a tremendous job. I would submit to you that the prosecution helped him a lot. So let's not get twisted. Don't start smelling your own
It was the facts
honor.
of the case that helped, but
All right.
it was in the state's case. I agree.
On that note, we're going to take another quick break, and we're going to
Starting to
continue
sweat.
to share some ideas that you've given us about this case, your thoughts and opinions. If you want to join in, now's a good time during the break to do so. Lynn at LynnDoyle.net, or visit me on Facebook. I'm under Lynn Doyle, or Lynn, it's your call, Doyle. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call. We're giving you an opportunity to weigh in on what you think the future might hold for George Zimmerman. You know, a lot of people are actually comparing him to Casey Anthony, like the male version of the most hated woman in America is now considered to be George Zimmerman, although he has gotten an enormous amount of response on the other side from people who are saying this is just not fair. He should be able to move on. So, Nikki, taking a look at this, if you were his lawyer, what would you advise him to do now? Is there something that he could do to try to calm this tension that's between people?
I don't know that he can. I think maybe for right now he probably should go away for his own safety. I think that's one of the things that quelled what was going on with Casey Anthony. We weren't seeing her everywhere. So I think for his own safety, maybe he should be thinking about just stepping away. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, if there's going to be a federal lawsuit or a civil suit against him.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but if you're a defendant and you're found not guilty and then, you know, the prosecution has completely altered your life, does he have any recourse there to say that he was unfairly prosecuted?
Not in this case.
No, but I think
Not in this case.
Not in any case when there's an indictment or there's a preliminary
There are some
hearing.
cases where it's clear that, you know, somebody's on the take or there's,
I don't think you have that
That's
here.
not what's happening.
But I
Kind of
agree with you,
misconduct.
Nikki. I think he goes away for a good while, things calm down, and then very honestly, I see him becoming the darling of the NRA set and doing a lot of speaking
I
and
really
getting
don't.
paid very
Well,
handsomely.
not if he
really
wants.
don't.
If he wants to live a happy life, he probably needs to go on the other side and start supporting civil rights. You know,
I can't.
that's-
Can you really
that's-
imagine that happening?
But not yet.
I
But I
was-
agree
I-
with Nikki.
I was-
He needs a little calm down because those people right now that are present don't want to hear anything, don't want to see
Yeah.
his face. Let that calm down, and then perhaps.
And that's always a strange thing because once the time passes, once the moment is gone, then you can see him begin to eat his way back into or slither his way back into regular life. But I submit to you this, he has to change his attitude as well, because that same type of attitude that got him away, or let him get away, with this will not help him again. And we've seen this with O.J.
Would you
O.J.
want to
didn't go
hear
away.
from him? You know how they always give the big media interview
Right.
and they explain or they say, you know,
Well, he did
they're
it ahead
sorry.
of time.
He
He
did it
said
ahead of
it.
time, but I'm saying now, I'm asking Tyreek and Nikki particularly because they're representing African American communities today. If you would want to hear from him and have him say, I am so sorry this happened. What can we do to bridge the gap between the races? Would that be helpful?
I don't want to hear it now. I wanted to hear it before.
Yes.
And I wanted to hear and I wanted to see that. I wanted to see that in actions. And I think what I saw in actions with the him and his wife and fooling people to get out of jail and everything else, and the arrogance of his family, specifically his brother, Robert, and the things that were said, it came across that, you know, I killed the 17-year-old boy, so what? You know, I have a right to do that.
We do need
So-
to hear an apology somewhere,
I
don't
would
we?
definitely need to hear an apology. And I do think there's an element almost of smugness that came across. And I think if he had a really just said, I'm sorry, this was a tragic accident, this isn't the person that I am, I think in the beginning, I think people would have looked at it differently.
Yeah, I have to say, whether you're supportive of his right to stand his ground, if he thought it was self-defense, whatever, when he went on Hannity and he said this was God's plan, people across the board were saying, are you kidding? God had a plan to kill a 17-year-old? I mean, that would have been a time for apology, but hindsight is 20/20. Moving forward now, we're asking the question, what's next for him? So Jeff predicted here, you predicted the acquittal, what's next for him?
Well, I say, number one, there will be no prosecution under civil rights by the Department of Justice. The FBI already investigated it once. It could be for political reasons, but there shouldn't be.
Okay.
And then on civil, I really don't think that he's going to sue because, as I said before, if the plaintiffs lost, they'd have to pay for his lawyers.
Okay, last word there, Sadie. What do you think is next for George Zimmerman?
A period of hiatus, and then I think we will see him coming out, speaking on behalf of the religious right, the NRA, and the Tea Party.
And at that
Wow.
point, I do think we will have to get Tyreek oxygen because he will not be able to stand that. Tyreek, thank you so much. Sadie, good to have you here. Jeff, always a pleasure. And Nikki, we're so glad that you could join this discussion. You added so much to it. And we'd like you to add your thoughts as well. Email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. Until the next time, my thanks to my crew and to you for watching. Have a good night.